Welcome to the Top Order podcast. The four of us here this evening. Baldy's going to give you an explainer as to the change of set. But on the show tonight, we're going to talk England-Pakistan, which has just wrapped up on State Highway 1 in Multan. We're also going to talk a little bit of New Zealand-India. Kane Williamson injured at least for the start of the series. Pretty cryptic press release. Is there any way New Zealand can make this a competitive series against India? We'll also talk a little bit of T20 World Cup. The White Ferns upsetting India, but Australia sending a message that they are the champions of this tournament. And India versus Bangladesh T20s. Strength in depth. We've talked about it a million times on the podcast. There's lots more to come on that. All on this episode of the Top Order podcast. Stay tuned. Well, Baldy, we often start the podcast with an explainer. Normally when we've got a complicated tournament with dominators and eliminators and baconators and pizzanators and all those kind of things. But we are in a new home. We've got the it's not the original Top Order podcast, but it is that was the second print of two.
Yep. Limited edition.
Very limited edition, yeah. Warehouse stationery. Other stationers are available. But we're in a beautiful macrocarpa bar, so a bit of native New Zealand timber here. To hide a bit of the timber that's behind the desk, actually. But yeah, give us a little bit of a rundown on why we're here.
Oh, welcome everyone, and welcome to the new set of the Top Order podcast. It is a new renovation in the Baldwin House, and we're only really here because we do need to address the elephant in the room, and that is that one of us in the podcast is moving from his current home to a home a little bit further afield. So, Binksy, before we kick off the show, I think it's probably behooving on all of us to wish you farewell and bon chance alors as you migrate back home to closer to home pastures. But we will miss you here in New Zealand on the Top Order podcast. But the good news for our listeners and our fans and our viewers is that the Top Order podcast will continue with you dialing in remotely and giving us more content, I believe, is the big announcement. So we won't bury the lead on the show. We'll give that to you to elaborate on a little bit.
Yeah, look, we will have more content, I guess, two hemispheres, so we can cover multiple time zones, get the flux capacitor running as well. But the aim is obviously that we can cover stuff from two sides of the globe, I guess, and potentially announcements on special guest stars as well coming soon, all on the Top Order pod. But we can actually start pretty close to my home, not in physical distance, because this game taking place obviously in Multan, but luckily for us in New Zealand, broadcast on YouTube, which is kind of interesting to see the live stream going on, and the live chat got plenty of engagement, even if there wasn't a massive amount of fan engagement in the ground. They had the Envira phone charging station, which looked like it had two cables, which was actually sufficient to give everybody an opportunity to charge their phones, because there was bugger all people in that ground. But look, I guess a comprehensive win for England, and I know the BBC TMS stats guy Andy Zaltzman was probably fizzing at all the records broken and partnerships and triple hundreds and double hundreds and people coming in with broken thumbs and debutantes taking wickets and all kinds of stuff. But I guess we've got to talk a little bit about whether it was a fun test match to watch.
Who wants to go here? Stuart, I know you and I were chatting off air before we started recording about, was this a fun test match to watch? We've got differing opinions. Do you want to air yours first and I can follow up?
Oh, I mean, there's no hiding it. For me, this was an absolute snooze fest. Like, I know that, if you want to look at the scorecard, you can argue, okay, we've got to day five and we've got a result. This is sort of, in some ways, the perfect test, because we've seen all these records broken. We've seen big high scores. But for me, there's just no balance between bat and ball throughout this whole test match. The bat was just way too easy to bat for both sides. I mean, we'll get into kind of what happened to Pakistan in that third innings and the way they sort of crumbled there. But yeah, it's not a test match that I would revisit at any stage and want to see. And I think if we're thinking about the future of Test cricket, and a lot of people talk about that in many ways, and look, that's not the biggest issue here, because England just has to go out and win a test match, and they did that very, very well, and I'm sure we'll get to that as well. But yeah, it's not a game that I enjoyed barely at all.
It's funny. I actually did enjoy watching this Test match, and I didn't enjoy it from a balance of bat and ball perspective because it was heavily skewed. I think even the commentators on the live broadcast were indicating that it was 99% in favour of the bat, and I think they're probably 1% out in that respect. Although, to be fair, England took 20 wickets. England took 20 wickets in this Test match. Exactly. So, if we're picking nits, then, in fairness, there were 1,500 runs scored and 27 wickets taken. England took 20 wickets and won the Test match, first session of day 5. So there's not a lot we can pick nits in terms of the result, but the balance between bat and ball wasn't great. And I don't think the curator, if the commentators get their way, we'd start the second Test on the same wicket that the first Test was played on, and we probably would get a pretty good result, a pretty good balance between bat and ball, sort of days 6 through 10 on that Multan deck. But I really just enjoyed watching Joe Root and Harry Brook go about their business because they were fantastic. They were so classy. They dominated the bowling. Yes, it was straight up and down. The Kookaburra didn't do very much. The Lightning outfield was very, very fast. And, by the time Brook and Root got to double tons, you could see that Pakistan were mentally and physically broken by that heat and by that English onslaught. So there wasn't a lot of things to love if you were a Pakistan fan, but just watching those two guys play, two different styles, Root just hitting, brought up his 100, I think, with a punch down the ground. Oh, no, he brought up his 71 to go to the highest run scorer for England with a beautiful on drive. Yeah. Beautiful on drive. And then he went to 200 with a little tuck around the corner, and not long after that, just a beautiful late cut just down to third man. There's some
adjectives are available.
Look, it was hard, but you ran out of superlatives. Yeah. You really did. And even just watching it, the commentators stopped commentating on boundaries because they were just flowing so often. Brook would hit another one inside out over cover for 4-1 bounce, and no joy from the commentators whatsoever.
Can I also say, just because the pitch is flat, it doesn't mean that it's easy to go out there and score 800 runs, 5, 6, 7, 800 runs. There's still Test cricket, more so than the other forms of cricket, has the ability, or you have to focus on executing every single ball, not for 120 deliveries or 100 deliveries or 60 deliveries for your 100. You've got to bat time. You've got to bat sessions. You've got to bat days to get into this position. After day 1, no one would expect that England would have gone and scored 800 runs and then bowled Pakistan out again. No. Like that's great Test cricket to watch for me. I know I would prefer to watch that kind of Test cricket rather than 20 wickets fall in 2 days, or 40 wickets fall in 2 days on a turner. But that we might see when we get to India. I don't know. But I enjoyed it, is what I'm going to say. I prefer to be on that side of the ledger.
Yeah, look, I enjoyed it, and not just because England won the game. I think variety is one of the things about Test cricket. We can talk a little bit about whether or not having a pitch that didn't have a massive amount of bounce and carry in it, didn't really seem to deteriorate massively throughout the course of the 5 days is good for cricket. Australian curator, by the way, I think they've got a consultant. No, I'm not, but they've got a guy in that they're trying to sort of essentially centralise, I think, the way that Test pitches are produced in Pakistan. Okay. And I think that was referred to throughout the course of the commentary. Really going to be interesting to see what the second pitch is like, because this game, is back-to-back Test matches in Multan. They won't have had a massive amount of time to get onto this pitch to prepare it, obviously, throughout the course of the last 5 days. But the variety element of this, and I think showing to an extent, yes, if you look at this at face value, this is a victory for Bazball and scoring at, nearly 5.5 or something like that, and over 150 overs. But one of the criticisms of the England team over the course of the last 12 months probably is that guys have gone out really in fifth gear to start with. And a little bit like, a Zach Crawley or a Ben Duckett at times, they've got 80 odd or, 70 odd off the same amount of balls, and then they've thrown it away. What we saw here was clearly a partnership of extreme quality, from 3 for 250 to 4 for 700 between Brook and Root, the two Yorkies. And I think you talked about the boundaries, Baldy. I want to talk a little bit about the fact that when you actually look at that, the threes and the twos that were scored throughout this, and the placement and the way that they were both prepared, Root probably more so, to just wait the ball, hit the gap, and run 2 was testament as well to the fitness levels of these two, because you can't tell on television, but it looked bloody hot.
Yeah, it was 35 plus there.
It's been better 10 hours.
Yeah. And then the final thing I'll just say, I think, is, England have found a way to take 19 wickets. Abrar Ahmed obviously absent, injured in the second innings. And I felt that even though Pakistan, and we'll maybe talk about their batting performance, threw a few wickets away during the course of this test match, England looked like they were trying to do stuff and create chances. They had 2 mid-wickets and a catching cover. Pakistan didn't. They didn't.
They had that weird field to Harry Brook for a while, didn't they?
They had a weird field. They had a spinner being wided in Test cricket for hiding the ball. They didn't try and bowl bouncers for half an hour. They didn't try and bowl cutters for half an hour. Like you would have thought, when 2 guys are on 150, you'd go, Mohammed Rizwan, do you fancy a little trundle? What do you left armers? You thought they would have tried more. And England, showed that ingenuity. I thought it was brave that they stuck with seam this morning for so long, and then, got their rewards from that. And then when they needed to, they turned to Leach, and he immediately had an impact with that LBW in the second innings. There, getting Salman Agha out when he came on, sort of middle of the day or thereabouts. So look, really, really good performance, and I wouldn't want to see it every week, but to Raj's point, it's probably a great contrast to a 2.5 day test where it's seaming all over the shop.
Yeah, I think if we get this diet of cricket on the regular, we'd be having a very different conversation. I think if this test match was a do or draw and the Pakistan batted for another 2.5 days and made 450 plus, and it was, 550 place 800 place 550, we'd be having a different conversation. I think even as well, if Crawley chips one to mid-wicket and then Root chips one to mid-wicket and then Brook hits one up in the air, we'd be having a very different conversation. But all of these things have kind of come together for England in this test match. And I think we've really got to give them credit, because as attacking as they haven't been, the criticism has been that they're not ruthless enough. And in this test match, England were ruthless. They were absolutely ruthless. They got an advantage and they pressed it home. The only guy that I think got himself out in this test match is Zach Crawley, and he just chipped under mid-wicket, just got ahead of himself a little bit. You can't say that for the Pakistani batters. A lot of those guys did get themselves out in one way or another, not to take anything away from some really, really disciplined England bowling and some reasonable captaincy from Ollie Pope, and, a few drop catches here and there don't hurt the cause as well.
Can we? I want to pick up on a few things you guys said about Joe Root, and we can then turn to him in general probably. But I thought that the way he batted in this, we've often talked about. You look back at his record during this Bazball era, and it's incredibly good. And so, but at times we've sort of nitpicked it and gone, look, he seems like he's not quite sure of the tempo that he's supposed to bat in, and he's kind of getting stuck between wanting to play these reverses and all of this other stuff. I thought this was the perfect tempo for Joe Root. And, yes, it's a very flat wicket, but, the way you guys touched on, everyone else was going at a runner ball, and Joe Root just did his thing and accumulated so well throughout this innings. And, it was the ultimate display of his mastery at the moment.
Yeah, he is absolutely at the peak of his powers, Joe Root. And you're right, it is mastery. It is absolute mastery of his game. Harry Brook, a very different kind of innings. Swashbuckling, attacking, wasn't afraid to go over the top. But Joe Root's innings in this test match is just about perfect. It was almost perfect. And, even to the point where he got hit in the pads, he didn't wait for the umpire's decision. Yeah. He knew he was plumb. He just turned around, tucked his bat under his arm and walked off. I'm sure he'd be very disappointed that he didn't go on to get triple figures, but an absolutely masterful performance from Joe Root.
I think the key is Joe Root was great, had a great foil in Harry Brook at the other end. But what is, as a bowler, the most important thing you want after you've just fielded for 120 overs and, that heat is to watch your top order go out there and bat for 150 overs. Like that's key also to that third innings collapse that we saw with Pakistan, that the bowlers actually got a little bit of a rest. Mm-hmm. And as you said, the tempo, I think it was perfect. Joe Root did a great job. He was batting at 60-odd, I think, his strike rate I saw just before. Yeah. And Harry Brook was doing his thing at the other end. I think they batted well as a partnership. And results there to see, I guess.
Binksy, can I ask what? I mean, obviously, a lot is being made about the record that Joe Root has broken, and I guess conversations now about his standing in the game. What does it sort of mean for you that he's now the number one English run scorer? I know a couple of weeks ago we were sort of singing his praises as well, but yeah, sort of how much, I suppose, does that record mean to you as from a historical sense?
Almost nothing, to be honest. I think the thing that's impressive for me, he's played a volume of cricket, and look, we're going to get this argument, and you particularly get this argument, I think, from Australian fans and Indian fans who will point to the fact that England plays 17 to 20 Test matches a year, and if they did that, they'd have players with similar records. And
I think it's almost the other nations as well who have that.
Well, New Zealand as an example with Kane Williamson, for example. But I think when I actually look at probably the most significant thing, and Baldy, I think, touched on it a little bit with finding his way in this new era of English cricket. What we've got to remember is he came off a horrendous couple of years, 2019, 2020, in that he was captain of a side that was struggling. He had some niggles with his back. They were in COVID bubbles. They were trying to put on, cricket to satisfy a number of things. Our appetite as fans stuck at home, but obviously the TV deals as well. And we saw that take its toll on him, and his average dipped, below 48 career average at that particular point. The fact that he has now got that back somewhere near 52,
it's over 50,
yeah, which is up there in terms of, I think, how difficult it is to bat in England for half of your career. It is a tough place as a top order batter. The ball moves around. So I think that's probably the more significant thing for me, that the tempo that he's now found, and he's had to do that through a little bit of trial and error. He's got the reverse scoops out and all that kind of jazz. He's now settled into, I think, the ideal way of being Joe Root, which is, I think he's 4 or 5% more aggressive than he was,
definitely,
2 years ago. But he's not 15% more aggressive, which is where he got to in the early stages of Bazball. And, he was almost producing some of those Crawley-esque innings, wasn't he, where he looked great to 80 and then did something brain dead. He's now got, that hunger. And look, I just love the fact that he says, it doesn't mean a great deal to me now that I'm the leading run scorer. I'm sure it will when I finish, and I've got a long way to go. So that's the thing that really makes me happy.
As a sign of his class, though, I think the significance of him passing Alistair Cook in terms of that most number of runs for England is, you look at those guys who have got to those milestones, most runs, Gower, Gooch, I think Alex Stewart's up there in the top 5 or 6, and obviously Sir Alistair Cook as well. Joe Root's average is 5 or 6 points ahead of all of them at least, and it's 12 points ahead of Alex Stewart's. I think Alex Stewart averaged 38. Root's now averaging 50 and a bit. So that's, to me, the significant milestone, in that he's got there averaging 50, which is a benchmark for, truly elite, spanning generation type of players. So, I mean, we could talk about him all night, but yeah, his milestone now, he's only got 4 guys to catch, I think, in terms of that top milestone.
Yeah, and there's a couple of them not too far away. And just before we get comments, he's 51 is his average, so not the 52 that I inaccurately quoted.
Other averages are available.
Many apologies.
Yeah, no, I think it's good for him on a personal level that he has gotten to this milestone. But I think as a batsman, sort of in the pantheon of cricket, getting to 10,000 runs is what you want to do as a batsman. The change you get on top of that is great. If he takes over and becomes the all-time leading run scorer, that is also great. But I think in terms of building his legacy, it's going to be, what has he done in the Ashes, maybe? What has he done on, in these big series in terms of, well, it's great you've gone out and scored 262 in Pakistan on a road against a team that's a little bit in turmoil. Can you go to Australia and replicate that and win some series? Because that's something that has been missing from his resume.
Well, he's not got 100 in Australia. I think if he continues in this form, he'll correct that.
I feel like that is what is going to cement his legacy, doing those sorts of things, not necessarily chasing down.
Yeah, look, I think it might cement his legacy in our eyes and the eyes of probably the public. I think he will sit down with a glass of red and be pretty content with, probably 13, 14, 15, whatever it is, 1,000 test runs.
He's going to beat Sachin.
But absolutely, he will want to get a down under Ashes victory. And look, that I think is probably the second toughest thing in world cricket after going to India and winning. Currently, I think, and that's no disrespect to Australia.
You're 100% right.
I just think that is now slightly tougher.
I think he's going to beat Sachin I think he's going to do it in 3 years, if 3 or 4 years, and in that sense, I think he can blow way past there. The amount of tests that England play, he seems like he's very hungry at the moment. He seems like he's someone who has 4 or 5 more years in him if he wants it. He's mainly a red ball player now. Like I thought, okay, that Sachin number is enormous, and I ran some numbers. Joe Root, he needs 3,300 more to pass Sachin. Now it's actually just a little bit less than that. At the current rate that he's going, he's averaging 46.9 runs per innings, which is slightly different, obviously, because of the amount of bats that he gets. If he plays another 50 tests, which for England that's probably 4 years, he's 1,000 runs past Sachin.
I think the thing that we've got to be wary of is whether or not he's going to continue to have this vein of form for the next 4 years in past his 36th, 37th birthday. Not to cast aspersions on Joe Root, but we have seen quality batters, Ponting,
they've all fallen away, haven't they?
They have all come back a little bit in the back half of their careers, and I think we have to allow for that when making those projections around Joe Root. You're right, if he continues in this vein of form for the next 3 years, he'll get 15.5, 16,000 runs, but I think we've just got to temper our expectations around what we expect him to deliver consistently age 36, 37, because other than Khawaja and a few others, there aren't that many cricketers who are consistently averaging above 50 after their 37th, 38th birthday.
Yeah. I feel a quick word on Harry Brook from you guys. I'm biased. I think and I said this in the Slack channel, I think he could be better than Joe Root, who we've just spent 15 minutes talking about, but particularly maybe Raj and the eye test on Harry Brook. What do you reckon?
It's not so much the eye test. He looks great. All batters look great these days, aside from Steve Smith when he's out of form.
Or when he's in form.
But it's his temperament, the way that he goes after the ball. I compare, and this is... please forgive me for this comparison. I'm going to say if I compare him to someone like
yourself,
to someone like Finn Allen, who has the same kind of approach to the game, but doesn't execute on anywhere near the level. Him to go out there and consistently score runs. He's doing it around the world now.
Likes it in Pakistan, doesn't he?
But his game fits in every format of the game.
He is
what's so good about him.
He is an even-tempered, likable version, and I mean likable in the teammate sense, not in the kind of fan sense of Kevin Peterson. Same imperious kind of sense of self-confidence, same ability to dominate bowling, but just seems like, maybe a fraction more likable in the dressing room, or less divisive in the dressing room.
Less likely to have his kit thrown off a balcony.
Look, Kevin Peterson was a terrific character, but can rub people the wrong way. I think this guy is, he sounds like a pretty likable chap. And any time you bring up a triple ton by smashing the ball back over the bowler with a tennis forehand and just stand there, don't even celebrate the 300, just stand there and go, oh, they are.
Yeah. One of the key metrics, though, and unfortunately for an English batsman, is how do they perform in the Ashes. Kevin Peterson is so good, so likable around the world because he was able to perform on the biggest stage.
Yep. And in India as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So we need to see that from all these guys.
Yeah. And tenuous link to the podcast, he played in the same league as my little brother Harry Brook. They never came across each other. But there you go.
Very good. Can I ask a silly question, but just while we're before we get away from England's batting, what on earth does it feel like to be Ollie Pope in this situation? Because I always batted at 11. Never wanted to bat. You go out and you get a duck, and then you watch your batters. I mean, probably none of us have sat here for 150 overs watching our team bat. But what does it feel like when you're sitting there and everyone else is piling on the runs?
I can answer that question because it happened to me in a league game. It actually feels pretty good because, you've nicked off like third ball of the innings or whatever. When the guy comes in behind you and makes 196 or 300 or 260 as a captain, and you're just sitting there watching guys pile on the runs. Your bowling quartet is just sitting there playing cards with their feet up and their socks on the chairs, or whatever is culturally appropriate to rest your weary legs on. It is a good feeling, even though that you've not performed in your own mind as well as you would have hoped. It is actually a good feeling to watch your teammates be successful and put your team in a winning position.
No, it sucks. Yeah, it sucks. 100% sucks. Just sitting there and watching them, and you've missed out on this opportunity to, potentially pad your stats for the season.
Exactly. And the worst thing in club cricket is you might have to go and umpire or sit on the scorebook for half an hour or whatever. Run the drinks, do the sight screens for left arm round and over.
Oh, sitting on the scorebook's easy, just writing 4, 6, 4, 50, 100.
This is why you are the Tad Lasso of the podcast. You revel in others' success. Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
Do you commend him for going up the order when Duckett wasn't there, or would you have preferred to see something else happen there?
Yeah, no, I think that the reality was it was the last ball of the innings, obviously, where Duckett dislocated his thumb, and they only had a 10-minute turnover, obviously, or turnaround at that point. So it would have been a pretty quick decision, wouldn't it? And it might have even been a decision where, as the wicket fell, Pope would have been running to get his pads on anyway, because he would be batting 3 alongside Crawley and Duckett. That had got up into the rooms and would have gone, Ducky can't open the batting. And I think the logical step is your number 3 then goes, well, I'll move up one. So I think it was the right call. I think there wasn't really another option. If Ben Stokes had been playing, I reckon he might have stuck his hand up.
You were an option?
I was going to say, I've got 2 words for you. Jack Leach.
Yeah.
Although he'd been bowling for a day and a half. So
yeah, well, and also England want to create momentum, and he would not have been able to create momentum in Jack Crawley. So that would have been a terrible.
It was just a fun
terrible decision.
It was just a fun suggestion.
It was an option. Yes. Yeah.
I don't think there's any other established captain in world cricket who does that. I reckon they would have thrown someone else in. Even like a Ponting or a Williamson or even a Virat Kohli, he's not in the batting, I don't feel.
No, I think Kane would have done it. Anyway.
If they batted at 3, I think they would have done. Yeah. Okay.
Serious question just to maybe round out the England stuff. There's a very short turnaround between this next test.
Yeah.
How are both of these sides going to back up? Because these both bowling units have done a mountain of work, particularly the Pakistan, who I think Joe Root talked about in talking about the collapse that they had late on the 4th day. Joe Root used the words mental disintegration from spending that
amount of time in the field.
Spending that much time in the field just breaks you down as a batter, as a bowler. Those particularly, Amir Jamal's just come back from an injury. That bowling attack is going to be pretty banged up, I would have thought.
They're already without Abrar, who, as of this morning on the telecast, was still in hospital. Yeah. So we wish him a speedy recovery first and foremost. But it looks like, there's every chance that they'll be without him for the next test, which means they would have been a bowler down for 3 days or 2.5 days. And they're now going to have to back up. They've all bowled a lot of overs. I think some of the guys bowled reasonably well in that test match. They just got smashed, but they're going to have to find.
I thought Jamal bowled pretty well.
I like Amir Jamal. There's a lot of guys in this Pakistan side who you've got a lot of time for as cricketers. It's just they got an absolute pasting. I mean, how many times do you score 776 and get beaten by an innings? None ever in the history of Test.
556.
Well, they scored 220 in the second innings, right?
What you meant,
Anyway.
I think
the math in his head.
You did your math very quickly. Yeah,
I do think that I'll come to answer your question in a second. I do think you're giving them a bit too much credit. I do think I look back to England and how they sort of fought back in the first innings. Brinksy mentioned it earlier. He might have been looking at my notes. I don't know. And we talked. There was plenty of cutters, plenty of different lengths being bowled, and they actually fought back a little bit at the start of day 2, and I thought there might have been a little Pakistani collapse. Didn't happen. Salman Agha was very good to sort of wrest that momentum back for Pakistan. But I think that Pakistan need to go back to the drawing board and think about what they're going to do when things don't go their way. I think they missed a trick there. To answer your question about bowling loads, I think that England actually be relatively happy. I mean, if you look at the second innings, Binksy just had it up there before. I think they only went through.
Look at my notes.
Yes, please. They went through sort of 10, 12, their opening bowlers, 10, 14, 16 for the other pacer and cast. So I think they'll be happy with that. I don't, obviously they bowled a few too many overs in the first innings, which they wanted to, but they then had a day and a half off and they've come back and bowled a couple of
Yeah,
spells.
they'll be happy that they only bowled 54 overs, and Pakistan should be really angry that they didn't keep them out there longer. In the context of the series, that there should have been a conversation. If we can keep these guys out here and get them going into another spell, maybe make them take the next new ball to finish this job off. Then yes, we are in a better position in 4 days' time, even after we've lost this Test match. I said it before the series started. The thing for me is that England didn't replace Josh Hull in this squad. Ollie Stone goes back for his own wedding, I think. So you must be on a plane to go and do the groomsman's duties at that. But
Unfortunately not.
so England already have got a couple of seamers, missing from that. So they are going to have a little bit of a look at how those guys pull up in 2 or 3 days.
Do they have any backup
times
in terms of their fast bowling stocks? Because if Hull's gone home and Stone's going home, who else is there in the fast bowling?
So we don't know what's happening with Stokes, do we?
Oh, man,
they got
Potts.
Matthew Potts and I don't think. Why would you bowl Ben Stokes? But
I don't think they should.
He's the kind of guy that probably will. So I wonder what they will do there. They're probably going to have to go one of those guys that's bowled a lot of overs, whether it's Carse or whether it's Wokes or whether it's Atkinson, who for me is looking like he could have a pretty decent international career all around the world. One of those guys you would feel gets a rest for the next game.
Agreed.
Right.
Okay, we're going to talk about Pakistan a little bit. I just wanted to mention Shan Masood. I think that his 100 in the first innings, what a response to a time of real pressure, that he's had in the media, and I'm sure behind the scenes, in front of the camera, he's been quite nonchalant and positive about it, but I'm sure it hasn't been like that behind the scenes. To come out and score that 100 on day one, choosing to bat. What better response could you have from someone under a little bit of pressure?
You've got to give him a lot of credit, although I think his captaincy in terms of the fielding and the planning has come under some criticism, again, even on this podcast, right? So not a perfect game for him. What I did like, though, is that in the second innings when Charlie Shaheen was taking the long handle, he sent the message out pretty much straight away with the drinks man to say, hey, look, that's not on. Wind your neck in. We've got to do this properly. And, credit to Charlie, he did take that message to heart a little bit, at least for a little while. So there is a lot to like about his captaincy, but, when a side gets 800, you are going to run out of plans A through sort of S. And if you don't have plan T, U, and V, unless you've got the what are they called? The thing 1 and thing 2?
Oh, Cat in the Hat.
Yeah, from that had all the different plan A's and B's. Anyway, not my best analogy, but I'll get better as the podcast goes on.
An obscure Dr. Seuss reference. I like it.
Yeah. Anyway. You're right.
You like his batting, though?
I did. It was good. I did, yeah.
He's got his average just a tick above 30, which,
But like I said, there are guys that in that side that I like. I like Jameer Amal. He had a good series in Australia. He's only played like 4 or 5 tests. I like Sam Ayub. He's only played 4 or 5 tests. And I really got a lot of time for Salman Ali Agha as well. He looked good with the bat and reasonably handy with the ball, although he's probably not a world beater. But no one looked like a world beater in that test match with the ball, really, from Pakistan's perspective.
Cool. Anything else on Pakistan before we move on? No. Let's talk about the thing that I know you probably don't want to talk about, but I've probably got some notes on.
I've got some notes.
Kane Williamson injured for the start of this series. What do we know, and what are we feeling?
New Zealand obviously heading back over to that part of the world, this time to India. We've obviously just been in Sri Lanka. Question marks a little bit around why they came home to start with. I think that is, I suppose if you don't do that, it makes for a very long time away from home. And I think in general, since the COVID times, or maybe even a bit before that, New Zealand cricket in general has been quite, prioritising time at home has been a big thing. We've seen people, go back and forth between various tours. But anyway, New Zealand's going to the start on the 16th against India. We've got 3 tests, and yes, the news has come out that Kane Williamson is not on the plane. I think all the others are on the plane right now over there to India, but Kane is not on that plane. Picked up a groin strain, I guess.
A groin strain, and he's not on the plane for Kane.
Yes, a lot of rhyming there. But, well, we did get the cat in the hat. Yeah. But, look, I mean, it's obviously a massive blow for New Zealand. You don't need me to sit here and tell me what a great player Kane Williamson is, but, I think batting has been the big issue for us in this subcontinent or the series. The last time we were in India, the last time we were just in Sri Lanka right now, it's, even before, or even look back to our series against Bangladesh, on admittedly, I think, much different pitches than we're facing. Like, you talked about perhaps spin-friendly pitches in India. I actually think they'll be pretty good pitches. Personally, if I was the Indian side, there's been a lot of talk actually about whether they have got an eye on an Australian tour as well, and they're going to be thinking, let's create some pitches that have a bitterness for our seamers, that we can really sort of test them and put our batters under those conditions. But yeah, look, probably the place I would want to start actually is sort of asking you, Raj, around what we do with our batters. And really, I've seen Tom Latham talking about how I've seen him talk a bit about the positive, trying to take the positives, I suppose, about what happened in Sri Lanka and looking at the ways that particularly they batted in that second innings of the second test, and maybe even in the first test, how they came out and they didn't let spinners look to settle. They tried to, Daryl Mitchell we saw doing a lot of sweeping, Tom Latham sweeps, different players were going, Rachin Ravindra goes back and plays, they were very much had plans to try and score runs rather than let these bowlers come at them. My worry is that they're going to look at that and go, we need to be super positive and perhaps go a bit too far in that sense. And I just sort of feel like I'm keen to get your sense of what we can actually take from what we did see in Sri Lanka that was good, and then how we translate that to, not even arguably, to a much better bowling attack that we're going to face in India. Yeah,
again, it depends a lot on the pitches, right? I feel like if it is turning, we are going to struggle. But what I want to see, and you've asked this question to me before, what I want to see from New Zealand, I expect them to compete. I expect them to go there and compete. I expect them to have a plan to mitigate spin, whatever they find when they go there. How are they going to play it? I think we found in Sri Lanka that when we sort of batted at a lower tempo, so that 2 to 3 runs per over tempo, we actually struggled a bit more when we increased that rate to sort of a 4 and over against that spin, coming down the wicket a little bit, not being reckless, but showing intent, I think is key. That's what I want to see from our batsmen. Again, it comes down to a tools thing. Do we have the tools to do it? Kane Williamson not there is a big missing wrench from our toolbox. But look, I just want to see these guys go there and compete. That's the main thing I want to see.
I think a lot's going to fall on Phillips and Latham now to bat for long periods against India, because somebody in this New Zealand side has to bat for 150, 200 balls in each innings that they play India. Otherwise, New Zealand are going to get rolled. And I think that's an easy thing. It's an easy piece of analysis to make, but I think it's super crucial for Phillips and for Rachin and for Conway to a lesser extent, because he's a little bit out of form at the moment. But for those guys who like to be positive, they need someone to anchor the innings at the other end. And I think that's Latham as captain has to step up and eschew his recent run of mediocre, not mediocre form, but middling form, if you like. And Daryl Mitchell's got to prove that he's the guy in that middle order, wherever he bats, to be able to anchor that innings for New Zealand, as he has done over the last 18 months, 2 years on a number of occasions.
Can I ask a question that, I might not get out of the room after I've asked it, but when do we have to start having a conversation about Devon Conway?
Oh, I mean, we had it last. I think we had it in our last chat. I think that the issue is that I don't know that there's people pushing hard to take his spot, and that's, as much as people say yes, these guys are not performing at the level that we want them to. The guy that they're bringing in for Kane Williamson is Will Young, who hasn't exactly been banging down the door to get his spot back. I mean, he's had his moments. I still believe in him as a cricketer. Last time we were in the tour, last time we were in India, he scored an 80 that I thought was very, very good. So, I hope that he goes into this test now and thinks, I've got a great opportunity here to step in for Kane Williamson. I'm going to be batting 3, which is where he always wants, he sees his natural position to be. I hope he goes over there and takes it and actually puts some pressure on some of these guys and makes it a case that they actually are discussing in the selection meetings to say, who should we be picking? Because I think it's weird, because you look at that Sri Lanka series and all of the top 8 got 50s at some point in that series. just none of them went on to get 100, and they only did it once. So, and that's not going to be good enough if you want to, put on this kind of scores that you're going to have to do to win test matches. And, we just spent a long time talking about Joe Root and the tempo that he showed in this series, in that last innings that he played for England. That's the main thing I want to see. I want to see the accumulation. I don't think they need to go out there and trying to hit boundaries every ball and do all of that kind of stuff, because then I think they are going to get in huge trouble. They're facing the best bowling attack in the world, the most balanced bowling attack that has, 2 brilliant spinners, 3 incredible seamers. They're just not going to be able to take them apart in the way that you can think, okay, well, let's just have a crack at this. They're going to have to find ways to, yes, maybe you go over the top to, Ashwin comes on, you try and hit him over the top for a boundary or two, you pick a part of the field that you're trying to hit, you get a boundary, you get a fielder back, and you're going to have to take singles, because to Baldy's point, yes, I think it's going to be incredibly important that we occupy the crease for a long time, because we've seen just in the way that India played against Bangladesh, that when they want to, they can do their own version of scoring very quickly and do it to a very high level as well. So, yeah, look, this is going to be an incredibly, incredibly difficult series for us. And, I mean, I'm at the point now where I'm like, I am praying that we compete in this series. Like, I give us no chance to win any test match. Like, I don't think that's even... I don't think that's like not being a New Zealand fan. I think that's like a realistic. If we draw a test match, which is what we did the last time there, Rachin and Ajaz managed to block out for a draw. I think that would be a great achievement, quite personally. The way this India side is and how difficult they are to beat at home.
What we really need to try and avoid is being bowled out for 88, being bowled out for 45. Those sort of returns that we've had in certain games over the recent past. On the bowling front, Stu, Binksy's done a little bit of research and seen that Ish has been added to the second and third test squad. It's an interesting move. It must be something to do with the locations they're playing at, I'm sure.
It's and Michael Bracewell's heading home for the birth of his second child, I believe. So, yeah, he's unfortunate. I think, again, so, I mean, from on the bowling side, I would expect that, we're going to see Matt Henry come into the side probably for Tim Southee. It would be my expectation now that he's no longer the captain. I think that does make us stronger. I think Henry's been very, very good for New Zealand over the past couple of years. The other change that people are calling for is Mitchell Santner to come out of the side. But I think with Bracewell going home after the first test, that almost makes that really difficult to do, because again, this might sound ridiculous, but what's the point in bringing Michael Bracewell in for one game if he's then going to be away and Mitchell Santner's going to have to come in? Because, as much as I would, Raj, you and I talked last week about how it would be quite cool to see them play 3 seamers, to see them go with O'Rourke, Sears and Matt Henry. But it just makes our tail so long. Like those 3, Matt Henry's been able to club a few sixes and get some runs in recent times, but those other 2 are very much tail enders, and with Ajaz in there as well, who's, he can hang in there for a while, but it means that once you get to 8, you're pretty limited, and that's where, having Santner in the side, I think it's almost, as much as he's not quite the perfect player that we want at the moment, I think he has to play.
I don't think there's any point in playing Bracewell for one test if you're going to have to bring Santner back for the next test. I like Ish Sodhi. I love Ish Sodhi as a bowler, but I can't see New Zealand taking, let's be fair, 4 batters into that test arena against India that are 9, 10, 11, all 4 of them. If you're taking, Henry, Sears, O'Rourke and Ajaz, or if you're taking Ish Sodhi instead of one of those seamers, you're taking 4 guys that are batting 9, 10 jack. And I think that's too short a batting lineup for New Zealand in this test series.
I think the reality for Ish, unfortunately, is that he just hasn't been consistent enough at test cricket. He just bowls... He just hasn't been able to find consistent areas, and he's been bowling a bad ball every over, and particularly against India, that's just not going to work. I've enjoyed him. I think, if you redid his career, his test career could look very different. The way he came into international cricket, played test cricket very, very young. Learned a few lessons, but was sort of ended up not playing Test cricket for a very long time, turned himself into a successful white ball bowler. And I think that's changed how his Test cricket has developed and his red ball cricket has developed.
I don't want to sort of dwell on Ish Sodhi too much, but I think you would forgive him bowling a 4-ball every over if he could also bowl an unplayable delivery every 2 or 3 overs, like Stuart McGill did. He gave you a drag down every couple of overs that you could pump for 4, but he also bowled unplayable deliveries that turned a long way. And Ish Sodhi doesn't quite have that aspect to his game, I think, that would make him a compelling option at Test level. He is a wicket taker, but he's not as compelling and unplayable as he needs to be if he's going to be fractionally inconsistent, as we've seen from him the last 2-3 years in the red ball side of things.
We can, talk about the philosophy of it as much as you want, but he is a white ball bowler at this stage. He doesn't bowl the right sort of pace or areas for a red ball bowler often enough. I really like him. Seems like a really good dude to have in the team. He adds a little bit with the bat as well. But at this stage, he's a white ball player. I didn't actually know that he was going on this tour in that second and third tests. Does he even get a go? Is there value having him over someone with the part-time capabilities of Glenn Phillips, who can also give us a lot with the bat?
He's just there as cover. What do we think about from the India side of this? I mean, I think they've made no secret really that, well, at least the media has made no secret that they are looking towards this Australia tour, that this Border Gavaskar is, the big series for them that they're looking forward to. I don't have they named their squad because
I've got what looks like the last 37-minute article.
I mean, I would expect it's the same, right?
It looks very similar. So the one that's kind of out there but not officially announced, I don't think yet, is Sharma, Jaiswal, Gill, Kohli, Pant, KL Rahul, Ravi Jadeja, Ashwin, Akashdeep, Jasprit Bumrah, Akshar, Siraj Yadav, Shami, Juv Jarrell as the spare keeper, and then Sarfraz.
Shami is the question. So, I mean, whether this report is correct, that's the question I had, of whether he comes back, because obviously he's a fantastic bowler. The World Cup, we were talking about, him being, one of the best bowlers in the world. And, we've seen Akashdeep come in and perform really well. We've seen Siraj have his moments as well. So, building into the Australia series, I'm sure that they would love to get Shami in and at least get him a test.
And I think, to your earlier point, I think you can just expect decent cricket wickets, because whatever 11 India pick, they've got class across the park. They don't need to make this a spin battle. They would feel as quite rightly their favourites, whatever the conditions.
Absolutely. I mean, one thing that I did want to point out about their bowling attack, Bumrah. I know every week I'm always talking about Jasprit Bumrah.
You like him, do you?
I do like him, and to your point that you can kind of produce whatever wickets that you want, and I think I would suspect that they look at this and go, if we produced a green seamer that went all over the place, we would destroy New Zealand in that sense as well. You look at Jasprit Bumrah. We talk about how difficult it is for seamers that from overseas countries to go to India and perform and take wickets. Jasprit Bumrah at home has played 10 tests, 44 wickets at an average of 15 and a strike rate of 32.
He doesn't need help.
It doesn't.
Doesn't need a green seamer. Just roll out a good Test cricket wicket and get those guys in the practice mode of being on good, fast, bouncy wickets, what they're going to see in Australia. And you know what, even if that plays into New Zealand's hands a little bit and New Zealand perform well, is a good test for India. I think there's nothing bad that can happen from producing a good cricket wicket and seeing some quality test cricket played, and a good balance between bat and ball.
Yeah. Here. Let's hope we see that, and not the prediction of Raj's 55.
There was a prediction that was
Let's hope it doesn't happen.
Let's hope.
Yeah. So the expectations are that you're not going to win this series away from home.
That is my expectation, that we're not going to win this series against India. If you offered me 2-0 right now, I would take it. 2-0 to India, I would snap your hand off and take that.
How the times on this podcast have changed, Michael. Wow. Should we move on and talk a little bit of white ball cricket? We've got the T20 World Cup going on. Baldy, do you want to open proceedings? We've not heard your dulcet Australian tones for a little while.
we have on this podcast, but let's have a look at what's happening in the Women's World Cup. I'm just going to quickly bring it up because I wasn't prepped for this segment. So bear with me while we have a look at what's going on. Look, the bottom line is Australia are doing pretty well. No surprises there. We have Pakistan 3 a.m. tomorrow, New Zealand time. But I think that the reality is that they're starting to flex their muscle, Australia. New Zealand played really, really well against India, and then just let themselves down a little bit against Australia. That weren't as competitive as they perhaps wanted to be.
But sorry, just jump over you.
Please
we would have taken the sort of 500 in those first 2 games, right?
Oh, yeah.
Winning one of those games has actually set us up. Well,
I did not back us to beat India. The way India's been going recently, the way the White Ferns have been going recently, and that win against India for the White Ferns was pretty much the perfect kind of performance and the sort of complete performance that I think, as fans, we've all been hoping for. We had a positive start from Plimmer and Bates. We had a quick fire 50 from Sophie Devine gets us up to 160. And then, then it's early wickets and every single time, early wickets from kind of everyone. We managed to, every time it seemed like an Indian player would get to 10, we'd get another wicket, and suddenly we ended up winning to the level where it really helped our net run rate. I don't think net run rate's going to come into it personally, because we now just have to win these next 2 games that we've got. We've got Sri Lanka, I think, first, and then Pakistan to finish. And on paper from this tournament, you'd think that New Zealand go into favourites, as favourites in those games, but in very recent times, Sri Lanka and Pakistan have both won T20 series against New Zealand. So these are not easy games for New Zealand, the way things are going, but absolutely wrapped with the way we've started and managed to pick up that win from that first game.
Your destiny is in your hands, because if you beat Sri Lanka and you beat Pakistan, India then have to beat Australia and beat them well for India to go ahead of New Zealand in that sort of semi-final spot number 2. I think Australia, regardless of they've got 2 more games to play. Yeah. They have to play Pakistan next, and then India. So, all of the permutations are still alive from that respect. But I think realistically, if New Zealand can beat Sri Lanka next and then Pakistan to finish, they're in a really, really good spot. Having a look at the other half of the draw, England are in the box seat with games to go against Scotland and West Indies. They're playing some really good cricket.
Yeah, but obviously they should beat Scotland. Scotland at the moment, hold a very strong team because they're holding up the rest of the group. England could be in a showdown game against the West Indies. Their final games.
They've sort of just been doing enough, England, haven't they? They haven't, really set the world on fire to this point, but they've won the game that they needed to win, which was the Sri Lanka game, or the South Africa game.
Which is ultimately what you need to do, but there is a little bit of jeopardy in this format, isn't there? That, we could end up in both groups actually with 3 teams with identical records, wins and losses. Then it comes down to how well you beat sides and net run rate and boundary countbacks and all those things we don't want to talk about.
I will just take this opportunity. We've just been very down on New Zealand to give a shout out to Rosemary Mair, who come back into the top side, I guess, recent times and have been super so far in this tournament. Really sort of figured out the pace you need to bowl on some of these wickets. The Sharjah wicket that they played, that game in particular, very sort of slow and the slow balls, getting it into the wicket. I mean, Megan Shute kind of solved that problem, on the other side and took 3 for 3 against New Zealand. But, really sort of, Rosemary Mair, great to see her kind of get into the mix and a lot of controversy sort of following New Zealand around in these first couple of games as well. Weird run out. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah.
I will say a shocking piece of running from Sophie Devine really is what set that up by, kind of calling so late. What did you guys make of that?
That's the rules, right? The cap was handed over.
So
that's the end of the over.
A dead ball, yeah. I mean, it made very little difference. For anyone who I guess hasn't seen it, over was called by the umpire. Cap was given back to the bowler, but I guess at the same time or very similar time, Sophie Devine called through for another run, and it ended up Amelia Kerr being run out. She was then dismissed the next over. So in the scheme of things, it probably doesn't make a difference in the game. But India were not very happy at the time. And then on the flip side of that, in the Australia game, Amelia Kerr then found herself in the middle of controversy again, diving in the outfield to take catch. One of those ones where live, I think it's out. and I still maintain that it's out. But the replay really doesn't help you, because you look at it and you see a replay and you see the ball is, part of the ball is touching the grass, and the umpire, third umpire gives it not out. So I think it's a lot more out than Devon Conway's was against Sri Lanka, if we're going to compare, third umpire dismissals. But it certainly added a bit of spice to that encounter.
That's a good segue to Australia. You'll be impressed with how they've started the tournament, quite dominant in their 2 wins so far.
I have been impressed, mostly because their bowling attack has clicked, and I think that's the thing that's most pleasing. Yes, our top order has been getting some runs, but we kind of expected them to. Interesting experiment to send Georgia Wareham up to number 3. They've done that before, but I think she's slotting back in at sort of number 7 or 8 is where they'll go for the rest of the tournament. But having that bowling attack in particular, Shut 3 for 3. It's nice to see Tanya Vlaemic back in the squad, even if she's getting kind of limited opportunity. So all of the signs are good. But we're yet to get to the real business end of the tournament for Australia, and we've got to take care of business against India. I think is going to be a little bit of a bellwether game to finish off the group for Australia.
They've been pushing Australia hard recently.
They have.
Haven't they?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, should be a good game.
Let's finish up with a little bit more white ball cricket. India's strength in depth team, shall we call it, giving Bangladesh a little bit of a shellacking so far, 2-0 up. Third match in the series, I think, is tomorrow, isn't it? But
Sunday, I think.
Sunday, is it? Okay. But yeah, we've had performances from Nishish Kumar Reddy, from Rinku, from Hardik, and others. We just named a 16-man squad where none of these players feature. We've said it a billion times, haven't we? But there is an embarrassment of riches, isn't there, for India at the moment across 3 formats?
Well, and I think they have the luxury of being able to be, one of the sides around the world that can say we have in a lot of ways, we have a different test side than we do our T20 side. And I think this side that we're seeing is in many ways quite possibly similar to what, they are building towards this next T20 World Cup, and thinking that a lot of these players, I think, could certainly find their way into that series. So, I mainly highlighted this because I just wanted to talk about some of the hitting, because it's just remarkable. Like, watching some of these guys just smash it all over the place. As much as I said that, watching the bat dominate the ball in Test cricket wasn't, just put me to sleep. Just, I guess, the small portions of it that you get in a T20 game, I just sat there marveling at it. There was a shot that Hardik Pandya played. I don't know, how many of you guys saw it, and he got bounced and he played a ramp, and he just kind of the sort of smug smile on his face that he played it with. I just absolutely loved it. And that guy just plays forehand. He's playing tennis half the time, it looks like. The sort of, I loved seeing Rinku Singh bat at 5. I thought that was awesome he's someone I think we've talked about for a few years now of, being such a talented player, but comes in with 10 balls to go and is expected to get 30. Watching him be able to come in a situation where India had lost a few early wickets, they were 50 for 3, and being able to actually build an innings, even though, there's not much building these days in the way that they go about T20 cricket, but just being able to see him bat for a longer period of time is something I've really enjoyed. So yeah, just the hitting that this India side is able to do is phenomenal.
Yeah, and probably just to add to that, Baldy and I were lucky enough to be at a famous Australian cricket retailer. Others are available, and we actually saw a box of bats that were on their way to one of the Black Caps. And honestly, you think that they can't get any bigger and lighter, and they can. They fit through the gauge still, but the amount of they're just I'm surprised I didn't need a second mortgage to walk out of that place.
You were close. You were close to getting a new bat at that point, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are we done with white ball talk? I've got a little bit of domestic cricket news to finish the pod.
You go for it. It's not on the run sheet.
Not on the run sheet, just an audible, because a little bit of Black Book news. Sam Constas, who we previewed, I think, last year on the pod, has now become the youngest Australian since Ricky Ponting to score 100 in each innings of a Sheffield Shield game. He made 100 in each innings for New South Wales, his debut Shield 100, and then he backed it up with 105.
Sheffield started.
Yeah, Sheffield Shield already underway.
It's on TV. It's like the only live cricket we get in New Zealand.
Currently, Marnus is captain in Queensland, and a guy called Bo Webster starting to firm as a potential replacement for Cameron Green if he's ruled out with this back injury throughout the Australian tour. I think Bo Webster...
Is he in the black book, or is he already on the radar?
He has been on the radar for a wee while. Tasmanian all-rounder. Did well in the county championship as well. Scored 100 at the weekend for Tasmania as they polled on 527. So just taking a leaf out of the Bazball book down in the Hobart.
We're happy to help. We're happy to help.
Look, you're helping out everywhere you can. A little bit of Australian red ball news there for red ball freaks, as I know there are many in the Australian Antipodean area.
Right. Well, I think if I look down under the counter, which is where our little recording device is now, we've hit the hour mark, which is about standard for a top order podcast these days. But it probably is time for us to leave all in one room for the last time in a little while. But yeah, never say never. We may be in the media centre at Lords, or I don't know, nice. Barbados or somewhere over the course of the next few years. But it is all we've got time for on the top.
Well, not quite, Binksy. So just before you go, if you could just reach down under the counter to your left. No,
I'm not doing that.
There's a little white bag there. We got you a present.
Okay. And we have to do this live on the podcast.
We do have to do this live on the podcast
with a bit of rustling.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we've got here, ladies and gentlemen,
we got you a present.
If you are listening to the audio podcast, this is less relevant, but you can see some top order podcast stubby holders. Immortalised with our pictures as well, and this starts a range of products that you're going to be able to purchase from our Shopify. So do take a log on. But thank you very much.
One of those is for you to take, mate. I know they're not going to need it in the UK where you're going, but we hope that you savour it.
Keep the beer warm in the UK.
Oh, that's true.
Yes, you put them on to keep your pint warm. But anyway, thank you very much, Michael.
That's from all of us. That's from all of us.
But yes, thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure, obviously, talking cricket every week pretty much since that emphatic 2019 World Cup victory for England in the white ball tournament. But it is good night and God bless from us all in the same room for one last time in Auckland. We'll see you next time on the Top Order Podcast. Good night.